boink in the name of the Emperor, brothers, because today we're going back down that rabbit hole again. We're talking more Total War, Warhammer 40,000. We've got new exclusive interviews now with even more information about the game. There's a lot of questions at the moment on how this game will work, and I'm hoping this interview will answer some of those questions. There is more concerns about the game, which I do want to address in a separate video. There's been a lot of talk about Dawn of War 4 versus Total War 40K, but I'm going to do a separate video about that and people's concerns about the whole match of those two games basically looking the same. But again, we'll do that in another video. Today's video, it's all about brand new information. This is from an actual German article which has been translated for me by a friend, and I'm hoping to bring that new information to you. So let's jump in, let's look at it, and of course, let's get waffling. Big shout out to GameStar who got this exclusive interview. If you want to go and read it for yourself, there's a link included in the description of this video. So let's start with the galaxy map, because this is really interesting. It's giving the players a lot of ways to play Total War Warhammer 40,000. So they state, the galaxy map is above everything else and serves as a kind of hub for what you actually want to do that evening, that day, or that weekend. The galaxy has been divided into numerous sectors and solar systems. The developers call all of this together the Crusade Theatre. It's a stage on which the Great War of the universe is being fought. From here, you can decide for yourself how you want to influence this war in the favor of your faction. You currently have the choice between three different game modes. These are known as flashpoints, which appear in the individual solar systems. So it goes on to say there's the major campaign. This is the classic Total War sandbox. Over many rounds, you build your empire and take on the competition. You gather the resources, raise armies, and you attack your enemies, such as the solar system can consist up to 10 planets. There's also a short campaign, they said. This will also be a shorter campaign where you can complete in one evening, and it says, for example, because there's only a few planets there, these will probably be more story-driven scenarios. And finally, it says there's strike battles, and which they talk about, these are basically short-term battles. Again, they're calling them strike battles. Here you jump right into the decisive battle that is currently raging and try to turn the tide with your units. So again, a lot of interesting ways to play the game, a lot of interesting scenarios that they're going around to make this game more effective for the different type of players. If you want to do the grand campaign, the big campaign, you can do that. If you just want to jump in and start purging, you can do that as well. It goes on to say that you can choose each of these modes and achieve a remarkable victory, but that doesn't mean the war in the galaxy is over. It goes straight into the next scenario, whichever you prefer. Now, according to a chap called Andy Hall, the system is primarily designed to respect the different demands of players and their time. A lot of us are going to have a lot of hours into this. A lot of us are just going to be jumping on for 30 minutes in the evening, right? So it's a game for everyone. That's what it's sounding like at the moment, which again is getting me excited. It goes on to say, however, your success in the individual solar systems also have an impact on the flashpoint in the rest of the galaxy. If you've achieved a major victory in the campaign, you can unlock new advantages for your faction. William Wright goes on to mention in particular special actions that are now available to a specific chapter of Space Marines, one of their orders, but there are also one-time advantages. For example, your Space Marines help a faction of the Astra Militarum out of a jam in one campaign, and in the next campaign, that faction may reappear as an ally. Now, for me, that sounds absolutely fantastic. Of course, I want that type of story building. If I help out maybe another Space Marine faction, maybe that other Space Marine faction shows up and helps me out, right? That's what we want. But we're all brothers. Well, technically, we're all cousins, except if we're from the gene lineage of Rogel Dawn, the best gene lineage. Anyway, if we go back to the article, it goes on to say, so much for the galaxy. Let's take a step down and see what a classic campaign in the 40K universe might look like. As mentioned, a single campaign represents an entire solar system with several planets. The exact appearance of the solar system and which the planets are present there depends on various factors. There are certain solar systems, each of which have been handcrafted and intended to represent a campaign scenario pre-planned by the developers. This is probably the most comparable to a classic Total War campaign where all the factions start at their designated locations. So basically, you know, you have Bretonia there, Empire there, etc., and it makes it a little bit fair so you're not literally swamped at the start. It does go on to say, however, since the galaxy map is large, there's also systems that are generated automatically. Here, the developers often cite civilization as a comparison, so at the beginning, it's not clear exactly which biomes will prevail on each planet, what locations there will be, and where each faction will start. To ensure there is enough variety, the game repeatedly throws different planet types together, so you might find yourself on a densely populated ice planet or a mining planet in the jungle. The individual planets in Warhammer 40,000 are comparable to different continents from the earlier Total War games. The space between them, on the other hand, is a connecting mass like the sea used to be. A continent on one of these planets, and on the other hand, functions similar to a province in the past. The enormous scale of Warhammer 40,000 had to lean to an extreme rethinking. Again, this is something that we've talked about countless times on streams. Like, if it's going to be a planet, is a planet going to be like a city kind of thing, and then like the space in between is the sea? This is what we discussed before. So this is all the planning and stuff that they've been waffling about now. Well, that they're waffling about to us right now. It is looking like there's a lot of plans got into this. Is it going to be good? I have no idea. Let's carry on with the article. Now, one of the things that we wanted to talk about is it going to be like naval combat? And it says here, what role do battle cruisers play in this? Question mark. Now, it goes on to say, unfortunately, there wasn't enough time to interview to discuss this. God damn it, this is what the biggest questions we wanted. Nice try, though. But you're probably able to upgrade your ships and train units in space as well. Again, I don't think they're going to have naval combat at the start. Maybe if it progresses and it's like a DLC expansion, it makes it a bit more like Battlefleet Gothic Armada, kind of. But I think it's just going to literally be like, you know, you take your ship, you take it to a planet, and you drop your guys off. I think that's what it's going to be at the start. It goes on to say, in any case, you can fire orbital cannons from space and virtually shred the planet. In any case, there are supposed to be planets where wars are raging from the outset, where you can already see the destruction from space. Here, the land masses are completely dented and covered with bruises in the form of craters, and you will have to destroy other planets yourself, exterminators. Talking about exterminators, it goes on to say, when things get really bad, you can resort to exterminators. Burn them all. Burn them like Vulcan burns Eldar children. That is the ability to destroy an entire planet. The Imperium is known for this, but Orcs and Eldari also have their methods. I don't even want to imagine, the article says, when this would make strategic sense. It always makes sense. If we're going to lose, then everyone is going to lose. That is the Imperial way, brothers. Now, the next part of this interview is very interesting because this is all about the actual battles in Total War Warhammer 40,000. Yes, we've seen some of the cinematics, we've seen some of the gameplay trailers, but there's still a lot of questions about this. And this goes on to say, the real-time battles are supposed to carry the Total War DNA. And just because there are lots of guns, tanks, and even spaceships in 40k, it shouldn't differ significantly from what we know. After all, Warhammer Fantasy has already featured huge explosions, tanks, and flying units. Since Warhammer 40,000 is more sci-fi than pure sci-fi, the battles here still have a physical and often take place in close quarter combat. Of course, getting a chainsaw into someone and stabbing it through their face mask feels beautiful. So you can still watch as huge numbers of units clash and wreak havoc. After all, that's what Warhammer is all about. I would argue that Warhammer is about the rule of cool, right? You may have better tech, but I look fabulous wielding my chainsword. It goes on to say, the biggest innovation are thanks to the new engine, which of course they discussed at the 25th anniversary, and the destruction potential it brings. In the course of the battle, a map can be completely leveled, especially in battles in densely populated metropolises. Bring it all down, purge it all. You can experience how the ravages of war bring entire skyscrapers crashing down. This sounds absolutely bloody amazing. The article then says, not only does this look impressive, it also hurts. However, this is a bigger problem for some units than others. A Space Marine in Terminator armor will probably just wipe the dust off his visor when a skyscraper collapses above them, and some orcs might even enjoy it. If, on the other hand, you command an army of small, soft Astra Militarum riflemen, there's probably won't be much left of them other than a big mess. A big dirty mess at the end of the day. More stuff. It says such weak units can actively take cover in the new Total War and even use the remains of the skyscrapers or craters bombed into the ground. So if you bring a skyscraper down, if your artillery shell makes a crater, put your units in there. I absolutely love the sound of that. This doesn't turn Total War into a company of heroes, it says, but it does make cover more important, especially since the cover mechanic is not meant to be a simple buff. It goes on to say, according to the developers, every projectile that leaves the barrel of a gun in battle is calculated realistically, and if it doesn't penetrate an obstacle, it doesn't cause any damage. It goes on to say, how well that cover protects, therefore, depends very much on how well the soldiers are behind it, and it can actually fit behind it. And also the angle of which the hail of bullets rains down at them. So they're saying, if someone's above the terrain, maybe, and it's shooting down, it doesn't matter if you're behind the terrain because it's coming down from your head, right? You're not going to get a buff like that. But if you're like shooting at the terrain and they're just behind it, then of course they are going to get cover. Completely makes sense to me. More stuff. Actually, it just mentioned what I just said about, like, airborne units and stuff like that. More stuff. It says completely Kevin, speak! I can't speak! Completely uncontrollable interactions can also occur if your Marines shoot down a flying horde of storm boys. Boss, we're going down! The madmen can lose control of their scrap rockets, hurtle through the area, hit a building, explode, and cause the entire house to collapse. At least that's what the developer David Purter promised them. Another factor contributing to the chaos is orbital bombardments, which can turn the battle on its head, or reinforcements arriving in droves when the Space Marines fire a salvo of drop pods from which a fresh squad of elite soldiers storm out shortly afterwards. Last sentence it says, or last paragraph, not to mention the completely different playstyles of the factions. Space Marines are usually outnumbered but make up with it with a pure power. The Astra Militarum drowns its opponents in cheap cannon fodder. Orcs are somehow both, and on top of that, quite unpredictable. The Eldari, on the other hand, act quickly but can't take much punishment. To compensate, they use psionic powers and sometimes teleport behind their victims. Absolutely fantastic interview. A lot of stuff in there, which is getting me more excited. Apparently, on the 16th of December, so next week, we are going to get another content drop for the game. The developers are going to put out even more stuff. They have answered one question right now. I'm going to put up in the background, and it was the FAQ. Where are the Chaos Space Marines? And they said, whilst they're not in the game at launch, they're absolutely part of our plans at some point, along with all the other iconic factions from the setting. Again, we're going to discuss that more in the video, probably on Sunday. I'm going to be putting this out on a Saturday. If you're watching it right now on a Saturday, hello. But I'm going to be putting out the Total War 40K and the Dawn of War 4 kind of, I don't want to call it drama, but like a lot of people saying it looks the same. I get where they're coming from, but I think they're going to be two completely different games. Both great games, but two completely different bloody games. Anyway, that's enough waffling for me. Thank you for coming. Thank you for watching. Vindication Rack is here all week. Just in case you want to leave your tomatoes at the door, I am taking them as compensation along with 10 memberships. Thank you so much. Hopefully you've enjoyed this interview. See you when I see you. Have a great day, evening, night, where you are in the world, and bye-bye.